Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Elliott from Dirk.com, and today we're going to be making this kind of cool car racing animation. Now we are not going to cover how to create the car itself since that was covered fully in my last tutorial, so go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. But I know a lot of you already did follow along with that one and you got your cars fueled up, just sitting in the driveway ready for some action. So without further ado, here is what we will be making today. We're going to cover everything you see here, from the guardrails on the track to the flag flapping, how to make the cars drift around corners, and even a little bit of camera movement, all to arrive at this exact result. So this is the file I've actually got up on screen from the end of the tutorial, so you know this is exactly where we're going to arrive at. Now, if you do follow me on Instagram, you might have seen me post this animation, which is the one I made when I was kind of researching and testing for this tutorial. It's a little more polished, but by following along with this tutorial and then spending some time afterwards tweaking your curves and little details, you can definitely create something similar. If you do want the file for this exact animation, that's what the Patreon supporters will have access to. So if you've got a buck or two lying around and enjoy my videos, then feel free to join up over there. This one's a lot of fun though. There's all sorts of little tips and tricks along the way. So buckle up those seatbelts and let's get to racing. Alrighty, so let's see what we can do about making that car racing animation. What I have here is a blank Blender scene. I'm going to append in my car object. So File, Append, navigate to where you have that. I already have it here, navigated to, and I have it just in a file where there's just one object called car. So I'm going to double click that, bring it in, and you can see we have our car now in the scene. If we move into our look dev mode, you can see all the textures and everything came along nicely. You can see I added that little interior, and then also some little mirrors there, maybe some other stuff. A couple people were asking about like how I modeled the interior. If you were able to model the car, I don't think the interior should have been too tricky for you. It's really just some more boxes and then a little steering wheel there. If you're really having trouble with that, let me know. Maybe I can help, but if you can model the car, you can probably figure out the interior. That's kind of like your homework assignment, you know. So anyways, before I start making this animation, I need to do just a little bit of housekeeping here, and that's going to be, I want to scale this car down just a little bit. So actually, you know what, I don't think I actually need to do that. You could scale it down a little bit, but the main thing I need to do is I need to move this origin. So I want this origin to be right kind of between the wheels on like what would be the floor. So I need to move that origin down. The way that I'm going to do that is in my screencast keys, not that, in my N panel. So you press N to bring this up. Over here in the tool tab, there is a option for origin, so we can affect only the origins. So now if I move this around, it's only going to move the origin of the object, not the whole object itself. So like I said, I want to move that pretty much right to the center of the scene. So I'm going to press Shift S and snap my selection to cursor. And now once I've done that, I want to deselect that origins option. So now if I move anything, it's going to move the whole object like Blender normally would. I definitely spent like 30 minutes one day. I had checked that and forgot to uncheck it, and I could not figure out why. Like I was moving things and nothing was moving. It drove me crazy. So don't let my mistake be yours. Now anyways, you know what, just for the sake of it, I think I'm going to scale this down a little bit. I just wanted to be smaller. Like like when we were just working on the car, it's like it was fine being big, but now it's going to be like a tiny thing. So I just want to scale it down a little bit. But when you do that scale in object mode, you'll see that over here it now is at like 0.4. I want to press Control A and apply that scale. You usually want your scale to pretty much always be at 1 no matter what you're working on. I know that's created problems for some people when you're working with modifiers and stuff. But anyways, now that we've got that housekeeping taken care of, I'm going to add in the track. And tracks in most cases, or in my case at least, are curved. So I'm going to press Shift A, curve, and then I'm going to add a path. Now it's going to be a little bit tricky to see because it's kind of like on the x-axis. I wish there was a little bit of a better viewport display there for, there might be some option, which I'm sure somebody will let me know about in the comments. But anyways, what I want to do is press Tab to go into edit mode. And now you can see we've got a little bit more of we can see that a little bit better. And then I'm just going to go to my top view by pressing 7 on my number pad. Likewise, you could use this little button right there. And I'm just going to spin this around and kind of just move that to about right there. That's not hugely important, I don't think, but the most important thing is that the origin of that path is aligned with the origin of your car. Curves can get very frustrating, but if you're following along with these steps, then you should be pretty good. I'm sure I'm sure you all will send me plenty of questions though if you have issues, as you do, which I appreciate. I'm glad that I'm able to help you. Anyways, now that we've got these, it kind of started off with just a few points there. And so we can use those and just kind of move. We can press E to extrude and just kind of start creating our shape here. So I'm just going to go for kind of a shape like I had done in my sort of example here, where there's maybe like it's kind of like a figure 8. And but do whatever you want. You can make really any shape you like. You can spell out your name. You might have to make your track very long depending on how long your name is. But yeah, so once you've got the last point there, just shift click the original point and then press F to make a face. And then, won't make a face, but it'll connect them. It'll do what you need it to do. So now we've got our blob shaped track there. That's great. But we need the car object to move around that curve, obviously. So we're going to do that with a constraint. So if we click here on this little pulley thing, gear belt, whatever that is, that's the constraints tab. We're going to add an object constraint, and that is going to be, if you can probably guess, it's going to be follow path. This one over here under the relationship, that furthest to the right column. Click that, and it's going to be, anytime you see any like modifier or anything that's red, that usually means that it's not like having any effect. It's not doing anything. It needs more input from you before it can do anything. And in this case, it needs to know what path you want to follow. So I'm going to click that little eyedropper and just select the NURBS path there. Now, if we press spacebar to play our animation, nothing is happening. We need it to be animated. How is that going to happen? Well, there's a little button here, animate path, and boom, it animates. Now, I don't want to halt anyone's creative freedom here. You're welcome to leave it like that if you want, but I don't care for that look. It's really just, it should kind of move with the curve. Now, we will be adding some Z rotation. That might be how you think you do this, is just manually. And this is, I'm actually having a blast here, just kind of like drifting this guy around, controlling the Z rotation. As fun as that is, that's not very efficient. That's not how we're going to do it. There's a little option here called follow curve. And now that it'll follow, it'll like point it in the direction of the curve. So if you were looking at that curve, you can see all those little arrows. That's the way. And if you did need to switch direction, you can right click and you can do switch direction, which is switch direction there. But I liked it going the way it was. Now it is spun around the wrong way, so you could just rotate the whole thing in edit mode around, or you could just press this -Y and that should do what you want it to do. Okay, so that's looking good. Now, with that together, let's go ahead and give our track some actual like dimensions. So it's not just this line. And if you look in the curve options under the geometry tab, we have a few options here for like kind of creating some geometry out of this. And one is this extrude option, which you might think is what we might be doing, but we're not going to do that. The other is this bevel option, which if you wanted your car to go through a tunnel, that would be my recommendation there. But I don't want that. So I will set that back to 0. What I want to do is basically have my own object. And to do that, I'm going to press Shift A and add a mesh, and let's make that mesh a plane. Now I just want to move my car back to a spot where it's kind of right there so I can see how wide I need to make it. We're going to make this for 2 cars. I'm going to press S and X. So now you might be inclined to just kind of like model this out, like, bring it up like that. But what we're actually going to do to make this work is we are going to basically model the profile of this. So now that I have the width about how I want it, let's move this over here. And then what this is we'll scale this on the y-axis. Like kind of in our top view, we want to draw what the profile would be. And it's just going to be this will actually end up needing to be a curve. So I'm going to do something like that and then just delete that edge. So now if we go into our vertex select mode, you'll see we've just got that basic shape, which from the top, again, this needs to be done from like the top view. We can use this shape to define what kind of gets spread around that curve with this bevel object option. So if you tried to click it though, it's not going to work, and that's because it needs to be a curve. So the fastest way to make that happen is to go up here into your object, drop down there. There used to be a hotkey for this, but I can't, I think they changed it or something, or maybe there's just no hotkey anymore. But you want to convert this mesh to a curve. So curve from mesh. And with that, we will now be able to select this curve, and as our bevel object, we can select this plane, which we can rename by pressing F2 to track profile, if you will. Okay, so that's looking good. You can right click and shade it flat so you can see that's nice hard edges. And yeah, looking fine. You'll notice some banding here. You don't have your normal options. Like if you were to shade this smooth, you can't go into your the options we normally do to like auto smooth. So I'm just going to leave that flat for now. We're actually going to end up working with this as its own piece of geometry later. But for now, the way it is going to be just fine. So what you would want to do now is you start to notice, you've got some issues here. So we can go in and start to play with our track shape a little bit here. So I'm just going to go into my top view. And I think the first thing I want to do is just get the overall kind of top-down look of it about how I want. If you find that you've got a vertex segment, whatever, where you don't want it, you can X and dissolve it. And so I was just getting a little bit of a sharp edge there. You really want to use as little as possible to kind of get a nice smooth effect. So I think for me, that's going to be looking something like that. I really added too many there. Don't be afraid to delete some if you need to. And, play with your shape, get it to however you like. If you've ever watched a Derek tutorial, you know I'm a bit of a perfectionist here. So I'm going to be messing with this for hopefully not too much longer, but I'm just going to kind of keep doing it while I'm talking. Anyways, top view, that looks pretty good. I'm liking the way that looks. Play with yours as long as you want. I've obviously done this a few times, so I kind of know what I'm going for, but you might want to take longer with it. So what we were doing is just affecting the shape in the top view there, but we want to give this some depth. Obviously, there's a part here where it's kind of overlapping itself, so that's not going to make much sense. So what we can do is instead of just moving these in the top view, we can also move them kind of in our other view. So I'm just going to bring this up on the Z-axis a little bit, something like that, so that kind of comes up, and then maybe like this part comes down a little bit, and then maybe this part comes down a little bit right here. Just you want to kind of create sort of an interesting shape, if you will. I think something like that looks kind of cool, a little bit wonky. You can see as you're doing this, we're starting to get some really weird tilts, and we wouldn't want like over here, we want the car would like totally fly off the track right there. And it actually looks like it is actually flying off the track. So if you look at the object origin, you can see that is nicely following our curve, but it's off the surface of the track. And that's because that bevel object also is working off of our origin. So if we tap to go into edit mode, we can see that this origin is offset from the actual surface of the track. So let's press G and Y and just move this up right about there. And you can see, if you're looking over here while you did that, you can see that if you go above it, it'll pass through that, but we just want it right on it. Something like that. It looks pretty good. And now if we look at this, it should be much more closely aligned to our track. Yeah, that's looking a lot better. A little bit off, obviously, because the origin's in the middle there. But I think that that's going to be just fine. So we'll leave it like that. But about those tilts, so we don't want, we want to have some control. Like as you're kind of moving things around on the Z-axis here, we are losing a little bit of kind of the way we wanted this to look. So what we can do is have some control over that tilt. And in edit mode, in our N panel here, you can see that there is this tilt option. And what we can do is just start selecting parts of this and then controlling that tilt. And the track will move with it. So for that, I want that to be kind of like that. Maybe down here on this end is kind of like a banked turn. This animation is going to be money, doing all this banking. Get it? That's my joke that I came up with for this tutorial. Every tutorial gets at least one joke. Not liking that. Let's move that in. This is getting a little sharp over here. Let's kind of bring that out a little bit. Just kind of play with it. Get it how you like it. Maybe this needs to come up. Maybe this whole thing needs to be a little bit longer. I'm deciding now. Just kind of bring that out. Something like that. And this, by the way, is the time to make these adjustments. Sooner or later, we're going to get to a point where we're not going to really want to be changing the shape around too much, because we'll start splitting this off into multiple objects, and we want to make sure that they all are that they're all the same. So that's looking good. Got some kind of curves there. There's kind of a straight section, banks down, goes up, spins around, gets wild and crazy. Don't get too wild and crazy. I know y'all designed your cars for speed there, but yeah, just play with that tilt. Get a shape you like, something interesting. I'm thinking that that's going to do it for me. It looks pretty good. And now, maybe that won't do it for me. Ah, Derek, perfectionist. Let's just like move that over a little bit. Okay, that's fine. We'll leave it at that. Maybe this comes over. Oh gosh, okay, I really gotta stop messing with it. See, I'm thinking ahead here. I know when I want to like have a pillar popping down right there, so I'm like trying to overlap it a little more. But I need to be done with this part. Play with your track as much as you want. As I said, I've done this a few times. I'm going to be moving a little quicker. But you should take all the time you need to get your track looking just how you like it. And, okay. Done. Done. Just except for this one last thing. Okay, now I like the shape. So get your tilts how you like them. Adjust that all. And call it quits. So that looks good. Don't call it completely quits. Please follow the rest of the tutorial. If you're dropping off now, hopefully not, then yes, stay with us. So what do we need to do next? Let's go ahead and talk about, so now that we've got all these curves and these banked areas and stuff, we need to maybe have some control over kind of the speed. So right now it's just going at this linear kind of even speed, which is fine. But for one, I want it to loop, which is not looping now. And then also I want to have, maybe around these tight corners, it slows down a little bit. And on the straightaway, it's a little bit, there isn't really a straightaway there, is there? It's a little bit faster, but you want to have that control. So first step with that is going to be deciding how long you want this animation to be. In my case, I think I want it to be about 4 seconds long. So at 30 frames per second, 4 times 30, that's going to be 120 frames. And I will go ahead and set my frame rate to 30 frames per second. 30 frames per second is just a little bit smoother than 24. It's what all the cool kids are doing. Don't let any of those 60 FPS folks tell you otherwise. They don't have time to argue with you because they're rendering twice as many frames. Anyways, enough about those guys. That looks good. 30 frames per second, 4 seconds long, moving along nicely. But let's get back into how this path is actually being animated. So if we go into the curve here, that was happening in this path animation tab, which was actually set within the, so this follow path constraint has an option to automatically animate the path. That's what we clicked earlier. And what that does is just apply kind of a basic linear animation based off of 100 frames. But in our case now, our whole animation is 120 frames. So that's part of the reason we're getting some of this kind of like jumpiness, is that this needs to match the total frames of your animation. It doesn't have to, like there's other ways you can do this, but it gets very complex, like mathematically, and just kind of confusing. So I think the easiest thing is just to set that to whatever your total frames are. And in our case, it's going to be 120. So now this should loop, I believe. Yes, it does loop now. And if we actually look at this evaluation time, you can see here on frame 1, it's at 0. And on frame 120, it's at 119. So that's so that it loops. I tend to like to put the 0 on the 0 and 120 on the 120. But for some reason, it sets it up that way. But to have a closer look at that, let's bring down a graph editor here. So I'm going to go into my graph editor, which is right there. And you can see that we just have this endless straight line, this linear animation that just goes and goes and goes. Don't try to find the end of it. It's very long. You'll lose track. But there is this convenient red line leading you right back to where you were. Anyways, that is happening kind of mathematically, if you will. So when we press that button, if we press N here, it'll bring up our sidebar for the modifiers of the curves, which yes, curves can have modifier. And yeah, it added like this expanded polynomial. I didn't pay enough attention in math class to know what that means, so we're just going to ignore it. We're actually going to get rid of it entirely. I'm just going to press X, delete it. I feel much better now. So with that gone, we have lost our path animation. So you might be thinking we're moving backwards here. And while we are a little bit, what we're going to set up now is a little bit more control over that speed. So like I was saying, we took a look at the evaluation time here, and that's controlling like where along. So the frames is how many frames does it take to go from the start of the path to the end of the path. So evaluation time is like where amongst those 120 frames is it. So technically at like 60, it should be halfway through the total duration of the path. I think something like that. But anyways, on frame 0, I'm going to set this to 0, and I'm going to right click and insert a keyframe. And then on frame 120, I'm going to set that to 120, of course. And right click, insert keyframe. You can also use this little diamond option there, which you guys love to remind me about. I like right clicking and inserting keyframes, okay? I don't like the little diamond. I come from the old days of Blender. I don't think the diamond used to be there. That's some newfangled stuff. It's probably been there for like 6 years. Anyways, I've got it moving around now. It's back to moving and looking good. So it does have that slowing down effect, but this is what we were trying to do. Now we have handles. So now we can have complete control over the speed here. This is kind of like a speed graph in After Effects or something, I think. But so with that Bezier interpolation, we now have that slowing down effect, which I don't want. So first thing I'll do is just drag these handles down, and I want this to kind of basically recreate that linear animation. I want these to just kind of lead into each other so that when that ends, we don't have that like sudden loss of speed. So now it's kind of like more of a constant rate. And I probably didn't get it exact, but it's pretty unnoticeable. So what I will do though is go ahead and pick a few spots where I want this to slow down a little bit. So I've got a really tight curve right over there. So what I want to do is move my kind of time marker here, my frame marker, to right where that is. And then I like to right click, insert key. I'll use the darn diamond. Okay, so click the button. So now I have a keyframe right there. And so what I can do, so I'm not going to go into a complete explanation of like how the graphs work here. It can be a little bit complicated, but I want to kind of make it slower there. So with that point added, I'm just going to press R to rotate it and just flatten it out ever so slightly. And that will kind of create a little bit of a slowed down portion. You can see how it kind of slows down there now. That's nice. So it speeds back up. And then maybe we have it slow down a little bit right there as well. Let's insert a keyframe with the newfangled diamond. Make that just a little bit flatter. So now we've got it slowing down right there too. And then like if you want it to be fast through here, like maybe like right about there is when it's reaching its speed, we can insert a keyframe. And instead of rotating it flat, we can rotate it kind of up a little bit. So it's a little bit faster right there. And I'm holding shift while I'm doing this to make those adjustments very finely. So now if we look at it, it's just a little bit more interesting. You kind of got that fast part, slows down. Yeah, I'm liking the way that looks. So let's go ahead and move on to another part, which I think in this case is going to be adding our next car. And this might be a good time to go ahead and save. So I'm going to press Control S to save. And I'm going to name this 3 because this is the 3rd time I'm doing this. It's actually probably like the 10th time if you include all the scientific investigation I did to put this tutorial together, which I do, by the way. It's these don't come easy. You know, you really got to figure out what's the best, easiest way to teach something like this. All right, I'll get off my soapbox. I love kind of designing the way to teach you this stuff. So like and subscribe if you're enjoying. I always forget to say that. And support me on Patreon if you want to just give me some money. I don't need that money. I honestly don't. It's just if you are enjoying the work I'm doing and want to support me, you're more than welcome to. I have been donating a decent amount of that to the Blender Foundation, but as my Patreon subscriptions have gone up, I probably owe the Blender Foundation some more. So anyways, with the Patreon, you get tutorial files and whatnot. It's not supposed to be an advertisement. It's literally like $2 a month. Like you're not going to change my life, but it will mean a lot to me if you do support. So enough about all that. Anyways, let's get back to adding the next car. I'm going to move this one over so that there's a little bit of space. It's like, hey buddy, scoot over. We got another member of the family coming in. You got a little partner to race. So I'm just moving him over on the x-axis. It could be a girl car. Who knows? And now they are staying nicely in their lane there, and that looks good. So to create another one, I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it, and then I'm just going to move that on the x-axis kind of the other way. And I'm using Shift D instead of Alt D because I'm going to end up probably changing the color of these cars, so I don't want them to share all the data. So using Shift D there. So now if I press spacebar, we can see that this is moving nicely along. They're racing perfect together. It's neck and neck the whole time, and that's just not very interesting. So we need to have, we need to be able to control the speed of them independently. But if you remember from just moments ago, the speed is controlled with this curve here. So we need to have this other car needs to have its own curve. And now would be a time to start naming things. So I'm going to press F2. I'm going to name that first car, car 1. And I'm going to press F2 on the other one, and I'm going to name it car 2. And for the sake of seeing what I'm doing a little bit better, I'll turn on our favorite cavity right there. And then I'll also, what I was actually intending to do there was turn on in the viewport display, I'll turn on the name so I can see those, because right now they look pretty much the same. So let's turn on name right there. So now I have car 1 and car 2. So like I said, what we really need though, we've got car 1, car 2. We need NURBS path 1 and NURBS path 2. So we need basically, we need 2 paths. Before I get into that, I'm going to go ahead and press Shift D and X and just hold Control to move this over. And that's going to end up being our actual track. So I'm just going to move that to the side for now because we'll be using it later to kind of create some geometry. So, and while I'm looking at all this, where did my little where'd my track profile go? There it is. It's feeling like a little bit too tall for me. I know I'm not supposed to be adjusting this right now, but while it's all together, I'm going to do that. Just kind of make that a little bit more subtle. Okay, that looks good. So like I said, I need 2 tracks. So let's go ahead and name this one F2. Let's name it track path 1. Now let's name it car 1 path. That looks good. Okay, so that's car 1 path. So I need another one, Shift D, and let's rename that one car 2 path. Okay, so if we go into car 1, it is still following the car 1 path, and car 2 is also still following that. So I'm going to delete that and change it to car 2 path. So those paths right now though are still the same because we just duplicated them. But now what I can do is select car 2 path, for example, and I can just move this whole thing down. Now you wouldn't want to move like either of the ones on the end because right now that offset is exactly what we need so that it loops. But if you select the whole thing and move it down, you'll get you'll get that working the way you want. So you can kind of have it, but then of course they'll have a constant offset there where they're like always, like this one will always be the exact same amount behind that one, which honestly it looks pretty fine. You know, maybe you put your logo on the one that's winning. That's up to you. But let's just play with these curves ever so slightly. So maybe these guys got like kind of a different racing style here. Let's select our car 2 path. Maybe this guy doesn't slow down quite so much around that curve. So let's kind of move that up a little bit, and then maybe he's like really fast around that bend. So like, yeah, maybe that's like a little bit faster. We can like move this over, I think, or maybe we want it to be steeper right there. So he's slow, but then he speeds up. Oh, it's like he had some trouble there or something. And this is actually, it's kind of hard to do it with just one loop to have them like pass each other. But what you might want to do is make the whole thing a little bit longer. I think in my actual animation, I made it so that it was 240 frames, so twice as long. So there was kind of 2 laps around the path. Still looping, but gives you a little more opportunity to play with the kind of the neck and neckness of this race. So I've just made some really slight adjustments here. Not much at all, honestly. And that's just so that the distance kind of changes and adjusts, and it's just a little bit more dynamic. It looks kind of fun. So I like that. Right now we have our car 1 staying in first place, and that's going to be just fine. So with that, now we have these 2 objects here. So again, these are 2 objects. We would not want those to be on top of each other when it comes to rendering because you get some double geometry and whatnot. So since these are now really just being to control the cars, we can actually go in and delete the profile bevel object on both of them, because we've got it right over here. So now those are just following around. We have our 2 tracks on top of each other controlling the cars themselves. And yeah, I'm liking the way that looks. So what I'll do next, let's just, for the sake of seeing it, let's move this object back over. And this object is going to actually be the mesh. Now it might actually be a good idea to Shift D duplicate this. What we're going to do next is actually convert this to a mesh object and start working with it a little bit more. But before I do that, in case I did need to go back to my curve, I'm going to take an option, or take a copy of that. Let's name this object just track, and then let's name this track copy. And I'm going to move that to a collection, which I will just call the trash collection, which, if I need to get back to it, as I always say, would not be the trash collection. It would be the pat yourself on the back for making a duplicate collection. So yeah, that's just in there for reference if we need to go back to it. Similarly, saving often will save you from stuff like that. Literally save you. So yeah, we've got, where are we? I'm losing it here. What are we doing next? We've got everything together. It's kind of time to start adding some details. So with that track object, I'm going to right click and convert it to a mesh. So now I have a mesh. And if you didn't like, if you had too many or too little kind of definition here, depending on how like tight some of your bends are and stuff, you could, like if we undo this, you can change the resolution right here in the curve setting. So if like we zoom in here, if you bump this up, you'll get like way more detail. And if you bump it down, obviously it'll be less, but that'll start to look kind of ridiculous. So like the path that the cars follow, you probably want to leave pretty high. The default 12 is fine. And honestly for this, 12 is fine as well. So I just wanted to show you that you could, if you needed to change kind of the resolution of your curve, you would do it right there. So 12, like I said, looks fine. So I will go back and convert that to a mesh, and we have our mesh there. So now to give this a little bit more thickness, I'm going to add a solidify modifier. So let's add that modifier and then bump out the thickness just a little bit. Something like that I think is going to look pretty nice. And yeah, so now we've got some thickness there. Now to add kind of a little bit more structure underneath this, I'm going to duplicate this object. And we probably should, we're on a good roll here naming things. Under track, it's the underwear for the track. We're going to make kind of a separate part that just gives us a little bit of a detail. We want to just kind of start building this out so it looks like a thick kind of structurally sound track. So for that one, what I want to do is I want it to be kind of underneath the other piece. So for one, I'm just going to apply this solidify modifier, which you can't do in edit mode. Apply it. And then I want to press A to select everything. And then I want to just grab this bottom part here. So let's try to find a good place. I want to grab that bottom edge or that bottom face and delete everything else. So X and delete faces. So now I just have this piece is just kind of like the underside. And for that, we can add back in a new solidify modifier that goes the other direction. So that's just to give us kind of a little more thickness there, make it a little bit beefier. And yeah, I think I like the way that looks. And this would actually be a decent time to maybe start considering materials, just kind of start thinking about how this is all going to be broken up visually. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's add in a plane, just give ourselves kind of a ground plane here. And let's scale this whole thing up, something just really big. And let's just move this down so that it's kind of just a little bit lower than the lowest part of our track. So something like that I think looks pretty good. So that the whole thing is kind of floating just a little bit because we're going to end up adding some supports, of course. That almost rhymes, supports, of course. Now, if we enter into our rendered view here, we can see that, yeah, it's not looking so hot. We could go into our look dev, look a little bit better. But let's go ahead and take a little sidetrack here, add some lighting. So let's add in an area light, move that up, and I'm just going to make this whole thing really big. Now, depending on how you scaled your car, your values here are probably going to be a little bit different than mine. But I'm just making this Whole thing pretty bright. Probably could type in a value. Let's do 15,000. Move this up a little bit. Okay, so I had a little issue there. I was trying to fix that flickering. I think I've got it back together now. I didn't do no smoke and mirrors, so I didn't skip any steps. We're back to right where we were. So I've got the cars moving around. I've got my lighting set up a little bit. Let's go ahead and add in a camera. Shift A, camera, Control, numpad 0, Shift tilde to zoom out. Everyone does this differently. I know my way is probably not the fastest, but it's my way or the highway. What a perfect tutorial to make that joke. This is how I like to set my camera, just to kind of move it like that. Okay, so this plane needs to be a little bit bigger. And yeah, looking good. Let's we'll come back to these materials more later, but let's just add a track material for that piece, and we'll make it kind of a deep dark color. Maybe make it pretty rough, something like that. And then underneath, and please feel free to do your own colors here, but I'm going to name this track detail, if I can spell that. And I found that a yellow looked nice for that. Something about like that. And then maybe we'll make that thicker so we can see a little bit better. Something like that looks good. We don't want to completely like chop off our. Can the cars fit under there? Oh goodness! It's so close. Did they get chopped off? I don't want them losing their hoods. Ooh, wow, that's tight. So if you needed to go and make that adjustment, you could. Looks like we're good there. If yeah, okay, you wouldn't have even seen it if they did touch it. Anyways, we're good. Looking good. Watch out for stuff like that when you're making your track. Now I'll also maybe just add in material for the floor here. Let's add a new material. Call it floor. For that one, I like the dark green. Feel free to copy me exactly, or pick your own unique colors. Y'all are pretty good about picking your own colors. I see a lot of cool different options when it comes to following my tutorials. Okay, so those are racing around, looking good. What were we going to do next? We've got a little bit of that set up. We kind of just need to add some details here. But maybe before we do that, let's do one other little just animation thing. So when these cars are zipping around the track, maybe we want to give them a little bit of a drifting motion like I was kind of playing with in the beginning. That would be pretty cool, I think. And maybe also, maybe they don't. We'll handle that in a second. So we want to keyframe some Z rotation for each of these guys. And now I am not a professional race car driver, but I think kind of when cars are drifting, they kind of look into the curve a little bit. So I want to set for this one, let's press a Z keyframe right here and then insert that, and we can go back into our regular view here. Actually, you know what would be nice for right here would probably be the random. Yeah, now we can just kind of see the differentiation a little bit better, which of course it made those like the same color. So I've got a keyframe there. I wanted to make sure it ends there too, so I'll just do at frame 120 the same, just so that like when that passes through, we make sure our rotation is good. So now that guy's drifting all over the place, absolutely ridiculous. Let's add a couple more keyframes. So that's a sweet drift, and then maybe here it's kind of a little more straight again, and then kind of drifting into that turn a little bit. You don't want any keyframes to be too close to each other here, so move them if you need to. And then maybe it's straightening out a little bit more. Insert a keyframe. And then maybe here, it's kind of looking into the curve a little bit more. Skirt. Oh yeah, that's looking nice. And then maybe by here, it's straight again. Insert single keyframe. And maybe we need just one more where it's like right there. Insert single keyframe. Let's take a look at that. So yeah, pretty easy way to add kind of a little bit of a drifting look. There's a couple spots where it could use some finesse. Like, so that looks fine. It's drifting. I think that looks all right. Not too bad. You would obviously want to play with these more for your own final animation. But yeah, I think that looks pretty good. And now one other thing, since they don't like, okay, so right there, they're pretty close to each other. So we want them to be, I was going to say what I can do is I can move this back to kind of the center. We made our track big enough for 2 cars, but for the most part, they're really not even. So right there, they are intersecting a little bit. But for the rest of this, we can leave that car pretty much in the middle. Okay, so right there, they get a little bit close. So maybe right there, we'll insert an X keyframe so that it's over, which let's also insert one for this guy. Insert keyframe. And for this one, we better set up some curves too, some little drifts. So let's quickly do that. So on frame that, it's going to be, that'll be like that. And let's put the same one at the end, insert single keyframe. And then, okay, so he's drifting, straightening out. Had you done this when you just did your first car, you wouldn't necessarily have to do it twice. But I didn't do that. I'm sorry. So I'm redoing it. It doesn't take too long. And then you guys, if you missed anything the first time, you can see me do it again. It's like what a teacher would say. It's like some punishment. Well, you gotta watch me make the car drift again. What are you gonna do about it? Okay, so looking. What is that? Oh, that's the X keyframe I had inserted. So we wanna get this guy straightened back out a little bit. Something like that. Okay, so let's see. We're looking at car 1 now. How's he drifting? Oh yeah. Looking good, looking good. Okay, a little bit zippy right there, and that is the car 1, and that is the car 1 path. A little bit too zippy. Let's tone that back a little bit. Skirt, 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 skirt. Which you guys always ask how I do sound effects. That's literally what it is. It's like me making obnoxious sounds into my microphone. Okay, so we were messing with the X location. So I want that to be, did I get an X keyframe? So it needs to, there's another way to make sure your keyframes match at the ends. And I'll show you that in a second. So let's insert, let's say right here, this guy is in the middle. Insert a keyframe. And then it needs to be a little bit further out right there. Insert a keyframe. And I'm just leaving this on Bezier. It's going to look pretty fine. And then right there, let's have it also kind of back in the middle a little bit. Okay, so I think that's looking. So is the X, maybe I did already handle that. So let's take a look at the X location keyframes here. So we just want to make sure that whatever the first one and the last one are the same. So let's SY0, and then I'll snap them together to make sure they are the same. So it looks like they weren't, but we should be good now. Cool, looking good. Is this guy going off the track at all? We need to give him a little bit of X location. We need to give you a little X location, little fella. Let's give you a little X location. Insert keyframe. Now I just want to make sure when they're touching right there. Okay, so let's have this guy take the outside, insert keyframe. And then this one, let's have him take the, and I'm just going to move both of these. Take the outside, or the inside right there, whatever that is. Okay, so let's, I just didn't want them to hit each other. You know, we worked so hard on those cars. We don't want them to scuff the paint up or anything, you know. Oh, that's actually pretty dope. Look at that. They're like, what? That's looking cool. Okay, so this is obviously a little bit of a tedious, and this is a little bit too snappy right here. Let's move that over. Just move it over a little bit. Okay. Da, da, da. Curves are something that take a very long time to play with, and I will try to dedicate a somewhat appropriate amount of time to it by doing everything I just did, which is a little bit tedious, but in all honesty, like if you're going to be making this a very polished animation, you would spend the most time on the curves, guaranteed, to get them looking exactly how you like. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I think that looks pretty nice. Okay, so next thing we want to do, let's add some supports. I don't even know where we were. We were doing like materials or something. And while we're at it, let's just do some more materials. I'm going to press this little button. Let's name this car 2 and we will make it. Let's get ourselves a shader. I think we're pretty much done with the graph editor for now. Let's make this a shader editor. And instead of red on this end, if you remember from the last tutorial, which I don't know if I mentioned it yet, but there was a part 1 of this tutorial. Does anyone get that? That's where the car comes from. Let's make this a blue, maybe like a desaturated dark blue. Oh yeah, that's looking good. So now we got the double dirks, the blue and the red, looking nice. Maybe we get our camera a little bit better position, something like that. Bring it in, bring it out, adjust it how you like it. I will probably add a little bit more lighting here to make this a bit more exciting. Oh my god, my favorite rhyme. This is going to be super ghetto lighting, but I think that's going to work. Just trying to get some. This is a very poor lighting setup, but in all honesty, I didn't spend a lot of time on the lighting in the last one either. And it turned out looking just fine to me. Okay, so we've got to just kind of blast that with some light. You could use an HDRI or something like that if you want, but I think that looks fine. So let's get into some more details. For one, this thing is still floating in the friggin' middle of the air. We don't want that. We want to add some posts here, some pillars. So what I'll do is I'm going to take this object and make the pillars from that. How, you might ask? Well, I'll show you. Let's. I'm going to bring this. Oops. Let's Shift D. GX, bring it over, again holding control so that we can snap back to where we were. And for this object, I am going to, okay, so once again, let's, yeah, I kind of want the bottom edge. This isn't really that big of a deal with this one. Should we apply and take the bottom edge? No, we can just use what we got. Okay, so I'm going to press Control R to add an edge loop. It's a little bit hard to see in that view. Let's go back to here. Control R, add an edge loop, click there, just leave it right there in the middle is fine. And then I want to select the opposite, which is I think Control I. Yes, it is. I can never remember that hotkey, and delete the vertices. So that now I just have this one thing, and we can get rid of the solidify modifier. So I just have this one path that runs kind of down the middle. And what I'm going to do is make my supports from this. Now, if you remember from earlier, we had the option to control the resolution of the curve, which would in turn have been giving us less vertexes here, or vertices. I can never get that right. And so that would have been one way to control. Basically, we're going to make pillars out of this, and we don't want that many pillars. So we need to remove some of these. And the way that I found works pretty well for that is to press A to select them all, and then we're going to search for a little thing called checker deselect. And F3 brings up that search window, by the way. Oh, I forgot to turn back on my screencast keys. I'm so sorry. Let's turn this back on. If you missed a key, I'm sure I'll throw it in somewhere after the fact. So this looks like a nice snaky thing. But this checker deselect has some options. And basically we're trying to remove most of these. So we want a pillar every once in a while, and we're going to press X to delete where we don't want a pillar. So that's going to be like, we want to delete more than half of them. So I'm going to select more of them. So let's just bump up this selection until we've got just every once in a while a little spot that's just still black, which is deselected, and that will be a pillar. So let's press X now and delete those vertices. So now we just have this kind of little dot pattern of where our pillars will be. So don't lose track of edit mode, out of edit mode. Okay. So I'm in edit mode now. What I'm going to do is press E and Z and just bring that down. And then you can press S and Z to scale them on the Z-axis, SZ0 to make them all flat. And then, and yeah, so now we have these little posts here that are going to be our supports. And to give them some thickness, what I'll do is add a skin modifier. So let's add a skin modifier. It's gonna seem like they all went away, but if you go into edit mode, they are still there. But the skin modifier needs to know like where the root of this object is, and it's thinking that this should all just be one line, but it's not. So the easiest way to get it to kind of detect them all is to press A to select them all, and then just click mark root, and that will mark where the root should be. So now if we move this back over till it's properly aligned, which where the heck was that? Looks like that. Then it should work. If you have some poking through, you can adjust it. See, that's why I was wondering if I should take the bottom. I'm just going to take the whole top here, and let's just move all these down a little bit. So you can see right there, it's kind of poking through. Let's just G and Z and just move that down a little bit. Check for any other spots where it might be poking through. I think we're in good shape. Okay, so that looks good. The next thing you could do is let's go ahead and delete the edges, or the kind of the posts where it's intersecting the track. So we need to kind of create a little bit of a bridge. That one's cutting it close. Maybe we just make them all a little bit smaller. Let's do Control A to do that. Should we just get rid of that one? Let's just get rid of that one. X vertices. Where else? Okay, right here. X vertices. I'm pressing Alt Z to go in my X-ray mode here. And I'm just deleting the places where it's intersecting the path. So that looks cool. We got our one lone support there, holding up the highly heated part where this is intersecting, and that's gonna drive me crazy. Where is that? What is that? Is that X location? Just bring that back a little bit. Okay, we're good. You wouldn't even see that, but it was gonna bother me, so I had to fix it. Okay. So we are good. We got supports. Now to give these supports just a little more detail, one thing I found worked pretty cool. And by the way, you can do the supports so many different ways. I played with countless options of how to do this, and this is just kind of what I settled on as looking the best, easiest to do. Follow along with me briefly. We are going to make just a little bit of a detail at the bottom. Let me show you how to do that. I'm going to press E and Z very close together, just so we have kind of a little gap there. And then I'm going to press E and Z one more time. And then with those all still selected, if you accidentally deselect them, just box select the bottom. They should all be aligned if you did that SZ0 step. And I'm going to press Control A and affect the thickness here. So now those will get a little taper out. So that's Control A, controlling the radius of the skin modifier. So something like that I think is going to look good. And you could go down one more time, just to give them a little flat section. And yeah, now we've got our supports there, but it's a little bit below the plane, so you could move the plane up, or the plane down, or you could move these up. I just kind of want them to be just sitting on that surface. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And while you're in here, if you want to add a little bit of detail to this, you can add in a bevel modifier. And just leave the settings how they are. You can bump up the profile if you want, but if the clamp is on, it's gonna prevent you from doing that. It looks pretty good just with the default setting. So just now let's have a little bit more detail to them. If we hop back into our rendered view, we can also add some, it's already got, since we duplicated it from this object, which by the way, we can shade these all smooth. Now let's shade that smooth, but turn on our auto smooth option to keep that sharp part sharp. And then we can do the same thing here, shade smooth, auto smooth. There, okay. So that's looking good. And really we've got the basics together here, but what I will do is show you how to add a few more details, things like the headlights and the flag, and then also the lines on the road and the little guardrail. So let's try to bust through those last little details now. But as you can see, we're pretty much done with the animation, and it's just gonna come down to some small little details to kind of make this pop. Those details to make it pop. That's what it's all about, right? So we've got our sick track right here. Let's add the guardrails. So we will do that by creating some guardrails. So I'm just gonna actually create them right there because I think that'll be a good reference. So I snapped my cursor to selected. Let's just add in a plane, and then in edit mode, I'm gonna scale this down. Something is auto updating again. It's driving me crazy. I hate that flicker. Let's make kind of a half of our guardrail. We're going to do this with a mirror modifier. We can go ahead and apply that. Let's apply a mirror modifier. Okay, looking good. And let's have this go up. And maybe this kind of goes out. And so that I can see this, and because I will add it eventually, let's go ahead and add a solidify modifier. Sometimes this can be frustrating when you're working a side view on something with no thickness. So honestly, I mean, you could add a solidify modifier and delete it just so you could see things. Let's do even thickness here. Okay, so I've got, that'll kind of come out from the track like that. And then let's have it kind of like Shift D and then E. And this will just kind of be the, like the guardrail. So let's select that, Shift D, move it up, and then Shift R to repeat that action. Okay, so that'll be kind of our guardrail. Now these obviously we need to scale out a little bit. We're just kind of making one like section of guardrail, if that makes sense. Okay, so that looks good. I can already tell it's probably a little bit small, so or a little bit big. So let's scale that down a tad and then apply the scale. We're just going to throw off our solidify. So let's readjust that. Okay, that looks good. And also for another tad little bit of detail, we can add a bevel to that. I think you want to add the bevel before you end up adding the next modifiers. It'll make things work a little bit faster. I'm just going to adjust this bevel so it's not quite so harsh. Okay, I think that looks good. Now for the, and we'll want to turn on, I'll actually show you that when it's an issue so that it makes more sense. So we want to wrap this around the track, and for that to happen, we're going to need a lot more of these, obviously. So what we'll do is add an array modifier to do that. So with the array modifier on there, we want to have this offset be, okay, and this was a problem last time. I think what I want to do is rotate this around so that it's going this way, actually. Apply that rotation and then change this from X to Y. Okay. I think when you do the array, you want the X to be what it's you want the X to be the correct direction. So let's just bump that up just a tad so they're a little bit separated, just a little bit. And then you don't want to just guess how many you need. So there's actually an option. So instead of fixed count, you can do fit curve. And then we can just select either one of our car paths. And now that will add the appropriate amount. So that is the total length of guardrail on our track. Send that to the construction engineers, get your quote. Just kidding. We've got the guardrails there. Now to curve them around, we will use a curve modifier. So let's add a curve modifier. And with that, we will select another object, which we can do the same path. And okay, so that has applied. It looks pretty janky right now, but it did it correctly. If yours is going at weird directions, what you need to do is play around with the rotation of that actual object. You can also play with these deformation axes. And then there's also the mirror. There's the direction, the way it's offsetting. There's a lot of, like, this is why I'm saying curves can drive you crazy. So like, there's a lot of variables of different rotations, and each object has its own rotation and whatnot. Really, really confusing. But again, just try to like go back, follow the steps I did as closely as possible, which is usually something I try to discourage in a tutorial. But the curves can get really frustrating. But just know that you can make it right. You just need to like play with the rotations and stuff until it looks good. So anyways, we've got a couple things we need to fix here. So first of which is this isn't, it's not big enough. So instead of going to edit mode and then like moving this out and then checking it, an easier thing you can do is down here in the curve modifier, we can select this little option, which will show it like when you're in edit mode, it'll still show the modifier active. So now we can just make these changes and see what we're doing a little easier. So I want that to just kind of pop out from the side like that. And then maybe we can move it up just a tad, something like that. Oh, but I don't want it to go through. So let's maybe make this actually come out, GY, and then make it kind of come down. Something like that. Does that look right? Oh wait, I think I want this whole thing. I want it to intersect that part, not the other one. Okay, I think we're looking good now. And then maybe these can all come up. Like GZ, make it a little bit taller. Okay, I think that'll look good. Now, as for those other problems, so it's a big straight section. I don't want that. I need it to have more, it needs to have more geometry. So let's just add in some edge loops. Something like that. And this is Control R, by the way, to do that, which I don't remember if I said at the beginning or not, but it's way too late to say it now, but this is, I'm not saying all the hotkeys here. This is a little bit beyond a beginner tutorial, I would say. But hopefully you're following along without too much trouble. I'm having a good time. I'm following along without too much trouble. Sorry, I'm not trying to brag. That was just a dumb, yeah, I'm making the freaking tutorial. Hopefully I can figure out how to do this. We've got, do we have an intersection there? Part going through. Thought we had a bad spot. Looks like we're safe. Okay, so cars, less likely to fly off. Guardrails in place, looking good. Now, with that same object, we can add in our little dots that go down the middle. What are those called? Like lane markers or something. So I will do that by just within that same object, Shift D, rotate this, and make our little stripe, EX, something like that. I think it's going to look quite nice. And now let's just move that up. So let's just GZ until we can see it. There she is. And now with that, if we want it to be curved, we could also add some edge loops right there. Let's actually add more than that so that that curve looks nice and crispy. Okay, so it looks like we might need to move that whole thing up a little bit. There's some parts over there where it's not quite getting it. Okay. Why are you being tricky right there? My path has some weird, I don't know what that's all about. You get these little kinks here. It's something to do with the path and the tilting. Hopefully yours doesn't have that. I'm not going to take the time to fix it right now, but that would be something that you could obviously do. So let's get that, and let's just bring this up a little bit more. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. So we've got our things there. Let's go back into our rendered view, and for that white actually I would say looks quite nice, but I want to add a sort of a metal material for the guardrails, which how many of y'all watched the metal materials after the last tutorial? I haven't actually checked the views. Let's just do, let's name this guardrail. And like I said, I'll make that a metallic material, and I'll kind of use like a, sort of like a dark green here. I just kind of liked the way that looked. Again, I've played with this for hours. You should take all the time you need to kind of develop your own color system that you like there. But now for the actual little stripes there, I'm going to use the track detail material, which I'm getting that darn flicker again. It's going to drive me nuts. Okay, and so I just assigned that to that center object. Okay, so I think we are looking even closer to being done. We've got the guardrail being very wonky right there. Oh, why is I don't want that. My cursor was moving. Shift C. I like my cursor to stay in the center the entire time. Okay, so things are moving around. Things are flying around. What was next? I think we want to do, I'll show you how to do headlights. I'm just going to do it on one car. We'll do it on the lead car because he's boss. He's blazing the trail. Don't need no blue car behind him. Okay, so I'm just going to get it to where it's kind of straight there because what we're about to do is going to be very eyeballed. So let's tab into edit mode. No, let's not. Okay, let's tab into edit mode. Let's select that face right there. Shift S, cursor to selected, and I'm going to add in a spotlight. And now I just need to point this spotlight ahead. So I'm going to use the rotation there. And like I said, this is going to look a little bit funky, but I just want to make it look about right there. So we got our spotlight. Let's add, let's give it a lot more power so you can start to see it. Which maybe this is a little too bright. Let's turn this down to like 9,001. It's over 9,000. Wow, old references there. Okay, so turn that light up to whatever you want, and then so you can see it a little better, you can bring up the that size, and you can of course control the blend. This is all starting to get into kind of personal preference there. You can change the radius to control kind of how sharp it is. We'll leave it something like that. I think it looks fine. And then Do not accidentally press play because it'll move the light, or it'll move the car and you want it to stay where it is. Dude, oh my god, that flickering. I have got to find out what is doing that. The viewport is updating. Alt-D. Somebody please leave comments. I thought it was an add-on, but it's not. It's not doing that. It's not the add-on anymore. Okay, so Alt-D to duplicate that, so I got my second headlight there. And just once again, kind of check, make sure those roughly pointing in the right direction. Shift select them both, and then shift click the car, and then Control P, parent to object. Okay, so now those should move with the car properly. And it looks like they are. So our drifting is a little bit funky in a few places there, but gosh, this got like really wild over here. So just when you're setting your track up, don't go too crazy. Derek went a little wild. Derek's track is a little janky. Play with yours as much as you want to avoid that. Go back and repeat the steps if you messed up. It'll be good practice. Builds character. So yeah, we got that together. Looks pretty good. Go ahead and feel free to add the lights to the other car. Next thing I was going to do, oh yeah, let's do just the smallest little icing on the cake of this tutorial, which is going to be a tiny little beautiful flag simulation. So let's add a plane. Let's move over here where we can see it. Tab into edit mode, RX90. And then I want to just scale this out to flag shape, something like that. And then start giving it some geometry, which I'm trying to get it to squares. Okay, those are about squares. Now I can just right click and subdivide. You want them to be squares. They're not quite. I didn't really get them squares, did I? Okay, anyways, that's close enough. We'll leave it like that. Now I want this to be a cloth simulation. So over here in the physics tab, right there, you can turn on cloth. And it's going to fall as cloth would if there was nothing else telling it to do anything else. So it's just falling. I don't want that. I need it to be, what if we could like pin it in place? Well, we can. Let's add a new vertex group and let's just select an edge here and we'll do that edge and let's add a new vertex group. Like I said, press that button and we'll name that pins. And then you need to press assign. So now if we were to deselect everything and then you had that vertex group selected, press select, it will select those. So we know that that has properly assigned to that vertex group. So now over here in the physics properties, we can turn on a couple things. For one, let's turn on, where would it be? Where would the pinning options be? Where are they? I don't do a lot with this. Shape, pin group, boom. That's the one. Now if we let go, it will, it's pinned properly. Looking good. Now, why is it looking there? Okay, for some reason it was a little bit funky there. Well, it's like not, it was looking good for a second, then it stopped. What happened? So I know we do want to turn on, do we need to turn down like stiffness or something? It didn't do that last time. Come on, why does it got to do that? I do know we want to turn on self-collision so that it'll run into itself whenever it decides to work, which is not now apparently. You can control a lot of things with the cloth. Do I need to adjust the stiffness or something? I have no idea why it's doing that. It wasn't doing that last time I tried. Shift S, cursor to selected. Let's add some wind. Let's add a force field, wind, RX, RY actually. And then kind of just move this over. Having it not at a perfect angle is going to help get kind of a more cool animation. So now let's play our animation. Okay, so it seems to be working now. So for that wind, let's turn the strength way up so that it starts to blow our flag around, which I normally wouldn't include this, but it's a nice little extra. And I did put it in my animation, and I knew if I didn't, somebody would ask me about it. So we've got the wind there. You can add some noise to the wind, so it's a little flippy flappier. You can like just reposition it. Oh yeah, looking good. Okay, so that's fine. next thing you might want to do is like add a solidify modifier to this just to give it a little bit of thickness. Something like that. Might want to shade it smooth. Turn on your auto smooth. Then maybe add a subdivision surface just to make it look even smoother. Oh yeah, looking good. And then for that flag, you obviously would want to put your own logo on it. So let's add a material. Let's change this up here to a shader editor. Let's do a new material. Call it the flag. And then let's Control T to add a texture. And that's with the Node Wrangler add-on enabled to that hotkey. And I'm going to find a Dirk logo because what the heck else would I do? Literally nothing. And then I want to adjust the UVs for that. So let's go into our UV editor, tab into edit mode, select it all, and let's just project from view, and let's get it in place. Make it a Dirk flag, something like that. Looks pretty nice to me. Dirk. I could make my little curved sides there, but I won't. I won't do it. Now for the color, let's do the roughness up. Sheen, I think something to do with cloth. You want that? I don't know. Anyways, it looks good. Maybe let's give it a little bit of color boost with some gamma. Looking a little more dirky there now. Now I do want to kind of move this into place. I don't like it right there. Let's move it. Which side should we put it on? Let's put it on. Yeah, let's put it over here. So I'm moving the wind and the flag over. So sometimes when you're moving things around with a cloth simulation, you'll have to press spacebar to kind of play it. Yeah, looking good. I like that. Let's select this edge here. Cursor to selected. Let's just add a very, very simple flagpole. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here. If you came to this tutorial to learn how to model a flagpole, I'm sorry, but you're just in the very wrong place. Let's look here. Look at me. You said simple, Derek, and then you're like adding these dumb little details that you don't need to add. I'm just pressing E and scaling to make my little flagpole there. And let's make it nice little rounded at the top. Speaking of frivolous details, auto smooth. Let's turn on the let's use that material. And yay, we got a little flag. Now maybe we need to rotate our wind so we can see that beautiful logo a little bit better. Looking nice, looking nice. Now if you wanted to loop the flag animation, I don't know what to tell you. That's a little bit tricky. But the way I worked around that was by just not seeing the flag animation when the animation looped. So I did that by controlling the camera, and which is I think the last thing I wanted to show you was let's show you how to make that camera point at a car of your choosing. So let's add a damped track, I believe. Yes, a damped track constraint. And let's select that good old car number 1. Now in the camera view, which let's go ahead and pull out a separate view here. Let's make this the camera view. Turn off the overlays. Okay, and then So that we just need to play here again. Annoying rotation stuff in Blender until you get the right one. There it is, -Z for whatever reason. I guess it's because like that's what it's moving on mostly. And so you could control, like if you wanted to hide the flag when it was coming in, you could like adjust the focal length so it zoomed in when it looped. So like it didn't have the flag, which I think mine literally loops like right there, so it wouldn't work. But yeah, you control the focal length there. Bring it out, bring it in. Save your file. Like and subscribe. Looking good. Play with your curves. Please play with your curves. Take your time with those. That's what's going to make your animation look better than the next person's, is by playing with your curves. Now, if you didn't want it to follow so closely here, there is an option in the damped track where you can control the influence so that's like only slightly following it, or you can have it follow it a lot, like exactly, and then it'll stay perfectly in the center. You can see we can zoom in super far here, and it's going to keep that car right in focus. So I think we did everything. Is there anything I'm missing? If there is, I'm sure y'all will let me know. This has been a blast. I hope you had fun making the car. Maybe not though, because that tutorial has gotten like 0 views. So hopefully the animation one does a little bit better. But I don't do it for the views. I do it for the use. So like and subscribe. Thanks for being here. I love you. Post your animations on Instagram. Tag me. Have fun. Don't go too crazy trying to learn Blender. It's very frustrating. Yeah, this is the part where I just ramble on about random stuff. And if you're the type of person listening to me here, then I really appreciate it. There was one thing I forgot to do, actually. Secret tip was to turn on a limit method for this bevel. Let's see, we got bevel right there. We don't want bevel right there. Turn on angle limit method. And then, shade that smooth. Oh my God, what did I just do? Right click delete. No, I want shade smooth. And then we can turn on auto smooth. Okay, that looks much better now. Very nice, very nice. All right, well, we're going to leave it at that. I think we've covered pretty much everything. The only differences you would see between my final animations and what we have here is that it's time. It's just really playing with all the little details and the curves, making those drifts a little more accurate, making your track shape just how you like. But yeah, take the time to work on those things. But like I said, don't drive yourself crazy. Call it quits at some point. Decide to be done. Share the work and move on to the next project, which hopefully is a Dirk tutorial. Or maybe a project of your own would be obviously fantastic. Anyways, like and subscribe. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next time. Peace.